I get to go first? So the BC believes that we have room for LNG on the north coast. It needs to be done responsibly, and we have agreed, though, however, should we be elected, we'll immediately look at the upstream impacts of fracking and examine the potential impacts from that. Saying that, out there on some of those forums about my opinion on LNG, I've never opposed LNG, but I'm always going to stick to my values, which is it needs to be done responsibly and respectfully, and that includes paying attention to the needs and desires of the First Nations that are impacted. And I also believe that we have to be careful. I mean, there are now 9 or 10 proposals between here and Kitimat. I don't really think that's realistic. It's not for me to decide how many are acceptable or not, but I think the markets will decide that. But I also think people need to be aware that it's not, all those terminals are likely not going to happen. Just, you have to be realistic about it.
The natural gas industry in general is probably my least favorite industry. Not because it is the term is the absolute worst, but it's the one that is being managed to be sold as much better than everything else. Like natural gas is always sold as clean burning, the green energy source, and so forth.
Cleaner.
Yeah, cleaner.
Not clean, very cleaner.
Well, it's often sold as clean. I think in the general public's feeling, like what has been soaked up in sort of the common belief, most people would probably tell you, oh yes, if you burn natural gas, then there's no emissions. The only problem is when you have leaks and stuff. But it only emits 40% less carbon for the energy produced than oil and coal. Plus it is the major source of methane emissions in North America. So if you're actually looking at just climate change issue, it's probably the worst industry. And so much of the focus on climate change is always about the carbon dioxide. We neglect the methane. And same thing when you look at the one that black eye does tend to get is around the fracking issue, which of course the Green Party doesn't think really needs to be looked at. I think it's been looked at an awful lot, and certainly produces the fairly well-known effect of tainting groundwater. But it also, again, produces an awful lot of methane emissions. I mean, fracking is essentially cracking the ground and putting it under pressure in hopes of getting natural gas up through the pipe. But an awful lot goes through all the other micro cracks. Which one am I going to be saying?
30 seconds.
Oh, thanks. So, you know, we are not planning on shutting down any industry. We certainly envision the natural gas industry to be part of BC's economy for a long time, but we're certainly not supportive of expanding and certainly not greatly expanding both the exports and production of natural gas in BC.